the meeting to order. For Governor Inslee's emergency proclamation 20-05 and 20-28, and stay safe, stay healthy. The City of Auburn is prohibited from holding in-person meetings at this time. City of Auburn Resolution number 5581 designates the City of Auburn meeting locations for all regular, special, and study session meetings of the City Council and of all committees, boards, and commissions of the city as virtual locations until Washington's governor authorizes local governments to conduct in-person meetings. With that, Teresa, will you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Here.
Councilmember Baggett.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Jayraj.
I'm here.
Councilmember Malinga.
Here.
Councilmember Stearns. Councilmember Stearns.
Here.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Here.
All right, thank you. Do we have any announcements, reports, or presentations this evening? Okay, hearing none, we will move into our agenda items for tonight. And the first item on our agenda is the legislative update with Director Hinman. Take it away, Dana.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, City Council. Thank you for having me tonight. I also have with me Mike Welch from Thompson Consulting. Mike works with us on the majority of our legislative issues in Olympia with the state of Washington. So I just wanted to walk you through a little bit about the 2021 session, the things that we worked on, the bills that were important to us, and kind of where everything landed when it was all said and done on April 25th. And Mike, towards the end, will give us a little bit more of a budget update on what the legislature passed, what things look like, and what things may look like going forward, and any sort of other questions you may have for either Mike or myself. So what I would like to do is just walk through a few slides with you, and I will share my screen, and hopefully I am successful in my endeavor. And you should be seeing, are we seeing the title slide for the legislative update?
Yes.
I'm seeing thumbs up. Thank you very much. So just real quickly, I wanted to do a short civics lesson with the group, and that's just to remind everybody that in the state of Washington, there are 49 voting districts, and we, the City of Auburn, sit in 3 of them. That is in the 30th, the 31st, and the 47th. And there's a breakdown of the 49 voting districts in the state of Washington, and you can see the tight little cluster there on the west side. That is King County, and our 3 districts do sit. This kind of an exploded view for you of the 3 districts that cover Auburn. The 30th is really kind of is almost on the other side of the tracks near where the mall is, and the area around the outlet collection goes down to Ellingson Road along the railroad tracks, around C Street and A Street, and it's fairly small. And then the 31st, that includes primarily the Pierce County portion of Auburn, Lakeland Hills, and then takes us up kind of Auburn way south around the Muckleshoot Casino and into downtown Auburn. And the 47th is the largest footprint in the city of Auburn. And that includes the majority of the valley floor, West Hill, Lee Hill, and pretty much everything else in between all the way to 277th. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a gauge as to the 3 districts and how they cover our city. And here is our 9 representatives, our Auburn delegation for 2021. And in the 30th, we have Senator Claire Wilson and Representatives Jamila Taylor and Jesse Johnson in the 30th. They are new. They were elected. This is their first term. In the 31st, Senator Fortunato remains with us, as does Drew Stokesbury. We've worked with Drew for a long time, and not really new to Auburn, and not really new to the legislature, because this is his second go around, is Eric Robertson. He did serve, if you weren't aware, a couple of terms back in the mid to late 90s and returned to the legislature again. And it was, even so he was new, it felt veteran to us. And in the 47th, we have Senator Mona Doss and Representatives Deborah Entenman and Pat Sullivan. And now a few stats. That therefore ends your civics lesson for the day. Just a little bit of history on the bills that are introduced and passed. Now, odd year sessions are the longer session of the year. And each in an odd year, if you look at the graph here going back to 1983, you can see that the legislature will introduce, that is the blue bar, several thousand bills each session. I'm not sure what was going on in 1995. That looked like it was crazy. And they will pass probably, if you look at the gray line that's going across for the percentage of those bills that actually are passed and make it into law, somewhere around 20% of those thousands of bills will be passed and make it into law. So maybe around 400 or 500 bills a year. We were told that the 2021 session, due to COVID and being virtual, was to expect that there would be fewer bills introduced and passed. And while that was true-ish, you can see at the bottom of this slide, there were probably, there was 1,448 bills introduced and 341 passed. And we went into it thinking we weren't going to have very much runway to work with, be succinct, be really clear on the few things that you would want from this legislative session. And it really wasn't that different than a regular session with thousands of bills and hundreds of things to try to track. And what you see here, this was the calendar of the dates that we find significant, that we keep a close eye on throughout the legislature. And most of those are cutoff days. And for a bill to move, it needs to go somewhere, like out of a committee or out of its house of origin or out of the opposite house of origin before it makes it to the finish line. And so usually when you're getting close to those cutoffs is when you'll start seeing a whole bunch of public hearings, and we'll need to testify or take note of what might be going on with a particular bill to see if it's going to make the cutoff or not. Sometimes we want them to make the cutoff and sometimes we don't, as you can imagine. And so overall, we were tracking about 50 some bills, and that is the list that you were provided in your packets. And these bills are on our radar for several reasons. Either they fit somewhere within the legislative priorities that we work with you all on going into a session. And 26 of those bills have been signed into law by the governor. 14 of those bills are centered around policing, and we are going to do a separate session with you. Chief O'Neill and City Attorney Como will be going over the impact of those bills with you and how that's going to affect the Auburn Police Department. So tonight we're going to talk about maybe 10-ish bills, give or take, that made it through the legislature that were of importance to Auburn for one reason or another. So Councilmember Stearns emailed me earlier about a couple of bills that you'll see on this list as well. So hopefully we won't take too much of your time, and I'll leave Mike enough time to go through some budget items. The two bills that we spent the most time on were House Bill 1521 and House Bill 1220. 1521 sought to restore the streamlined sales tax mitigation payments. If you remember, going into COVID, the legislature had passed a bill that kept those payments in place for the affected cities, such like Auburn and Kent and Issaquah and some other cities around that were negatively affected by the streamlined sales tax. I am proud to say that House Bill 1521 restored that funding, restored the backfill of what we should have received in 2020, which is about $1 million, and restores that funding going forward for the next 5 years. We were hoping that would be an easy lift for the legislature, and it pretty much was. It received bipartisan support, but we tracked it well through the end. I had Mayor Backus and several other folks testifying on this bill to ensure that it made it to the finish line. House Bill 1220, I'm giving a neutral to. This was very concerning to cities. It was put forth, the language here, this is the official language of supporting emergency shelters and housing through local planning and development regulations. Where we had a problem with this bill was there was a preemption in that bill that essentially said that homeless shelters, emergency shelters need to be built anywhere in a city, anywhere that there is single family dwellings. One of the arguments was that anywhere that anyone could sleep, then we should be able to have these shelters. This preemption was extremely troubling to a lot of cities, simply because we do our planning and zoning in very specific ways so that we cite things in our city in areas that make sense. And we were essentially able to get that language changed to something that we can live with. It's not the best, but there's also other language in there that requires our planning staff to make updates to our comprehensive plan in relation to the housing element. And those things were not funded. So there's a very hard deadline in there that is unreasonable. And we also know, since it was not funded, there is a law that kind of supersedes that. So those elements are now considered optional by cities, and hopefully there will be a fix for that language as we go forward. Essentially, it's just not a very good policy bill, and it took a lot of work to get where we were. It's not perfect, but it's doable at the moment. Another couple of bills that we were very supportive of and we are pretty happy about is House Bill 1070 really added basically one word to the bill that was passed last year in the legislature, allowing the councilmanic sales tax to build affordable housing, emergency shelters, and things of that nature. A lot of cities, especially King County, wanted to add acquiring into the language. And what that does is that offers the flexibility for, let's say, King County to purchase hotels and other existing structures to convert into affordable housing or possibly homeless shelters. And so we made sure it was known that we did support that, and we're pleased that the legislature offered that flexibility. And House Bill 1139, this was something that our Public Works Department was tracking pretty closely. And the reason they were tracking it is because it put the onus on the cities in regards to lead pipes and lead drinking water that may be in schools and such. And that now puts that onto the schools and does not expose the city to any sort of liability when it comes to the lead in drinking water. And the last two, House House Bill 1189, this is the tax increment financing tool for local governments. Everyone was pretty excited about this. I learned today that we are the 49th state to finally adopt tax increment financing. So we're not last, but we were one of only 2 states in the nation that did not have this sort of tool for local governments to use for economic development. And then Senate Bill 5031, this creates an aviation revitalization loan program and also has an oversight board connected to it. Because we have an airport that could potentially qualify for these funds, this was a very big win for us. And we also know that our very own Ingrid Gaub is being considered for a spot on that oversight board. So we'll do whatever we can with WashDOT to ensure that she is on that board going forward. So those are the bills, kind of the top line ones that we were really kind of following along with. And at this point, I'll take any questions folks might have before I turn it over to Mike to discuss budget and other fun things.
Questions for Dana, Council? I can't see hands in my screen, but I don't hear anything, Dana, so I'm not sure.
Oh, I
don't think
see
we have any questions.
Councilmember Stearns is raising his hand.
Councilmember Stearns, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Dana. That's a ton of work. And a lot of bills, and the graphics are amazing.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you about HB 1220. So it sounds like it really was just, well, I mean, I guess I have 2 questions. You said the Planning Commission is going to do something, or what is the city doing that in order for us to comply with it?
So 1220, I guess in layperson's terms, this was brought forward almost as a reactionary measure against the city of Renton keen about the Red Lion Hotel being converted into a homeless shelter during the pandemic, and kind of how that went down. And the city of Renton did pass some specific zoning regulations to, I guess, ensure that they would have more say in how those things are cited in their city in the future. And the bill sponsors were very unwavering on that preemption. And the preemption was it basically preempts a city from creating any zoning code that would prohibit an emergency shelter to be sited or built. And it was really just that that preemption, that taking away of local control of how we zone and how we do things in individual cities when it comes to those specific things. So there's 2 parts to that bill. One was the sheltering issue, which we kind of feel like we solved for the most part. There's going to probably still be some more conversations and work on that end. But right now they put some language in there so that cities do have flexibility in how they cite and zone things, and hopefully trusting that cities kind of know what they're doing when they're zoning for these things, as opposed to just simply saying, you know, we don't want homeless people and anyway, that's a kind of a longer conversation. The other piece of it is some updates to the Growth Management Act. And I would kind of defer to Jeff Tate to talk to the specifics on that, but some of the expansions and changes that the legislature wants for a city's comprehensive plan set some pretty tight deadlines. In fact, one of them was September 30th, and comprehensive plans don't get changed that quickly ever. So that was a concern. And what they're asking to be changed in regards to, I believe it's the housing element, and if Jeff is on and feels like he needs to interrupt me, he certainly can. But Because it's unfunded, then cities can consider that optional. And this is a previous law that exists with the Growth Management Act, that if the legislature is going to put something on a city that's major changes to the comprehensive plan, they also need to fund it. So that is what needs to be probably the bigger fix when it comes to 1220.
Okay, so we don't have to fix anything. We don't need to change our zoning codes because we're already in compliance with this, right?
Correct.
I mean, because I like the goal, which is to, not prevent, us, I guess, from unreasonably saying no shelters. But it's not just shelters too. It's also
Correct.
permanent supportive housing, which is really important, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Dana, Council?
Councilmember Baggett has a question.
Councilmember Baggett.
Yeah, Dana, is this bill going to be go forward for funding during the next session with the legislature?
1220.
Yeah,
I have heard possibly that might be something that they take up. And in fact, that's a question that Jeff Tate asked me earlier today, is that if they do go into a special session because they have one glaring problem they need to solve that Mike is going to tell you about, they may take this up as well. And then if they do choose to fund it, then hopefully the deadlines that they set are also adjusted as well.
yeah, it sounds like we need to turn Mike on to stir the pot over there.
Exactly. That's what we use him for. He's our pot stirrer.
There you go. There you go. He does a great job. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Dana, I think we may be ready for Mike.
All right. I will turn my screen off.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor and members of the council. I absolutely appreciate the opportunity to be with you today virtually. And I know many of you I know from before, and some are new. I'm new to you. So just as far as background, I'm Senior Vice President over at Thompson Consulting Group. And our firm's a boutique government affairs consulting and negotiation firm. I actually started working on City of Auburn issues way back, easily 10 years ago, on the Cascade Water Alliance water supply negotiation. And then you guys just haven't been able to get rid of my boss or I since. And my boss, Tim, wished he could have been here tonight, but this is his last full day in Washington, D.C., being with his new granddaughter. So we let him off the hook. But as you guys can surmise, this was an odd session, just as if I believe, you guys on the dais today, this is odd for you in terms of how you interact with the community and your peers. They felt the same constraints down in Olympia. Some of you I know were working on issues down there, and it just was a different environment. But with that said, they really focused on doing what the state to get through these unprecedented times. So, the focus, they came to budget agreement within the last 24 hours of the session, both on the operating side and the capital side. Some of the highlights were pandemic recovery. Obviously, they used federal funding for that. They have a $1 billion rental assistance and utility assistance outlay. They have $187 million in foreclosure assistance, which is obviously going to be a gigantic issue as we move forward. They used federal funds for vaccine distribution and testing to the tune of $1.1 billion. They used another $1.7 billion of federal funds to support the schools and their reopening and their safety within the pandemic structure. Affordable housing and homelessness was an issue before the pandemic, and it's a massive issue now, as most of you know. Some of the things they did in that respect, they bumped the Housing Trust Fund up to $175 million. They've got $120 million in there for rapid rehousing grants and homelessness projects. to name a few, one thing we also found during remote learning and remote work was the digital gap and the digital divide that folks are finding, especially in rural communities. So I know, and it is an issue on a number of fronts. And so they're going to put about 400 million into that, into bolstering the broadband network within the state. There's also money in there for childcare services, because we've had a lot of parents leave their jobs to take care of their children during online learning. We've also had just a number of situations, and folks have had difficult times securing and holding on to childcare services so they can get back into the workforce. This isn't really a budgetary thing. I mean, it may be because it's a revenue source, but there was a lot of climate action within the legislature. They maybe didn't get to everything they wanted to get to, but what they did get to was they passed a low carbon fuel standard, and which Ecology is doing the rulemaking on right now. They also passed, there's a couple names for it. I call it the Cap and Invest bill. But the caveat on that one is that it does not go into effect until there is a new transportation package. So the governor and all those stakeholders that were interested in seeing that legislation pass are now interested in seeing a transportation package pass. And finally on that one, and this one's kind of a wild card, but something more and more folks are looking at, is they put in about 137 million for wildfire prevention and wildfire fighting, and a lot of us on the west side of the mountains think kind of an east of the mountains issue, but they're finding more and more fires on the west side starting earlier and being much bigger problems than in the past for obvious reasons. So that's something to keep an eye on, because they are looking at it as a whole state issue, just because of what we're seeing in the last several years, if not, last decade, obviously due to climate change and forest health. So those are some of the highlights that I thought for you guys. Probably one of the last ones, which is yearly fight or biennium fight to keep funded, is the Public Works Trust Fund. And thanks to the good budgetary climate, at least in that respect, they were able to go back to even like a 2009 level at 129 million. And as you guys know, that usually that's one of the first funds rated when they can't make the budget balance. So that's a great sign. Hopefully it continues and municipalities can take advantage of those. But as I mentioned, the transportation package did not pass. They tried, they made a good faith, earnest effort. We were involved in that. And so now it comes to, well, how do you resolve what couldn't get them there? And that's still to be determined, but I can tell you that there is hope on the horizon for a transportation package. I know the two chairs from the House and the Senate, Hobbs and Fye, they have met in person. They didn't say whether they talked about transportation, but they just got together, which is always a good sign. I know both of them have intimated that they have identified their negotiating teams. So that's another great sign. They've also made contact to try to figure out what an official negotiation process would look like or need to look like, as well as if they do reach agreement, what would need to happen to bring everyone back to vote and pass it out quickly. I had heard that the earliest anything could happen would be late September, early October. And that is a result of a number of issues that need to be worked through, but also Senator Hobbs does National Guard duty. And that will be about the time where his National Guard obligation is on, he has a break from that. So that really kind of sets up an earliest case scenario. But again, it's going to take a lot of work in between that time to get to agreement, because really the sticking point's on the revenue side. How do you get the money to pay for it, which is always the case. One of the main issues is that bonding is never favorable. And I don't want to cast a wide blanket, but it's usually not the favorite solution to the Republican members of the legislature. So I know that both chairs, especially Phi in the House, are taking a very hard look at what this revenue situation looks like and what can be done. I know that there was hope out there that some of the federal funding could be used for culvert replacement. It sounds like they are getting an opinion from OMB, Office of Management and Budget, to see exactly if the direction they got is the case, because they would like to use some of that money for culverts, and then that would obviously add to the revenue possibilities on the transportation package. But I don't have that indication yet of what they're going to determine. So hang tight on that one. It may get wild and woolly. They may hold it over until next session, but I know that there was massive Zoom fatigue, which is what I think a lot of folks are feeling. And it seemed like there was not a huge appetite to bring everyone back virtually to do a transportation package, and that they would like it to be in a time where folks can meet in person. So that's kind of my quick overview. I'm always open to follow up, but what I can say is, and this is not self-serving at all, truthfully, is the fact that the Auburn team is in place with the directors and the mayor and all of the folks that are willing to testify and lend their expertise. It truly makes for an effective effort in Olympia. I mean, it just would be, it would pale in comparison if you didn't have the folks that were willing, that were as willing and as knowledgeable to jump right in. So I very much appreciate that.
Thank you, Mike. And although we're seeing you as a 2-inch by 3-inch little segment here, it's good to see you again.
See you too. And I do have to say that I have a full home office. So anything you hear or say, please don't hold me responsible for.
Not a problem. Councilmember Stearns.
Oh, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mike, you had mentioned culvert replacement, and I was just wondering, sort of along those lines, is there any funding for cities for, salmon recovery or river protection?
Let me check for you on that, because I want to be fully accurate on that. I know I hear a lot more chatter on the Fed side, but let me make sure. I'll get back to you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions, Council, for Mike? All right, Mike, I'm happy to hear that we're inching up on our trust funds, and especially on the Housing Trust Fund, where we're finally up to getting close to where we thought we should be. Another $25 million to go. We'll hit our $200 million mark. So hopefully in the next couple sessions, we can get to that point and get that going for the Department of Commerce. So if there are no other questions, Dana, thank you very much. Mike, thank you again. And great presentation. So have a great evening.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we will now move on to ordinance number 6823 with Director Galb, and I believe Amber Price is with us this evening.
Good evening, and yes, I'm going to actually pass this over to Amber Olds, our right-of-way specialist, who is—
I'm sorry, I said her name wrong.
Okay, who is going to provide you with a very brief staff report on the amendment.
Good evening. Just give me just a second while I share my screen with everyone. And hopefully everybody can see the map on my screen. Great. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, and Council members. Tonight I'm going to discuss ordinance number 6823. This ordinance would grant an extension of time to complete conditions associated with right-of-way vacation number V1-119 or -19. This vacation was previously approved by City Council on March 16th, 2020 under vacation ordinance number 6759. The approved vacation is for the alley north of 3rd Street Northeast between B Street Northeast and Auburn Avenue. That's the red area that's shown on the map on the screen. The current deadline for completion of the conditions associated with this vacation is September 16th, 2021. The applicant, Davis Development, has requested an extension because they're still in the process of finalizing development plans for the associated project. These plans include finalizing the parking and landscape design of required lighting and right-of-way improvements, and also coordinating power for the site. The applicant is also in the process of marketing 2 of the houses on the overall project site to be removed from the property. This takes additional permitting and coordination, so additional time is needed for that. City staff supports an extension of 1 year to September 16th, 2022 to complete the required conditions outlined in ordinance number 6759. This will align with the development's design review and also the city's capital project design for this area. The city's capital project will not likely go to construction until 2023, so that kind of works out for us. Ordinance number 6823 amends ordinance number 6759 and extends the time for the applicant to complete the conditions associated with the right-of-way vacation. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Amber Council? Not hearing any or seeing any, Amber, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, we do have one. Councilmember J. Raj, I didn't see your hand earlier.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That was because I put my hand up last minute. Amber, thank you very much for the update. But can you tell me why was this delay caused?
The applicant is still in the process of going through their development review and finalizing all of their plans and getting through the city's processes for that. I know that their development plans are still in review with our development engineer team.
Okay, so question is did we give them enough time?
Initially, we gave them 18 months from their initial approval date of the right-of-way vacation. When we had reviewed the application previously, they had agreed that that should have been sufficient time. They're finding that it's not, so staff is okay with extending this time.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. That was the only question I had.
Okay, Amber, thank you again.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have ordinance number 6824, and that also is with Director Galb.
All right. Thank you. So tonight, ordinance 6824 is a new ordinance to basically extend the temporary waiver for the right-of-way use permit fees that we put in place last year related to COVID and related to providing outdoor seating for restaurants. So you may recall that the previous ordinance referenced the governor's plan, and this was probably a couple of plan versions ago with different phasing. So we wanted to update the ordinance to tie this to the current status of what's happening with the emergency proclamation and the current governor guidelines, and also extend it so that it's in place until the end of the emergency. So once the governor lifts that emergency proclamation, and provide about 30 days for the 2 restaurants currently and any future restaurants that also take advantage of this to make a decision as to whether or not they remove their facilities from the right-of-way or whether they come in and apply for a normal right-of-way use permit and pay those fees. So that in a nutshell is what the intent of this ordinance is. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions, council? Councilmember Trout Manuel.
And Grant, what is the normal time for them to stay? And right now it's up until the governor issues the reopening, and then the extension would go to how long?
So this extension, so right now the current ordinance says until we move into phase 4 of one of the previous governor termed plans. Phase 4 doesn't exist in the current governor's plan. We've just got phase 1, 2, and 3. And then with the intent to reopen access with some restrictions later on this month, that will still continue in some way, shape, or form with some sort of impact to the businesses. So what this ordinance does is it changes it to last as long as that emergency proclamation is in place from the governor. So whether that is through the summer, into the fall, we don't know what that time frame is going to be because it will depend upon what the governor's actions are. But it gives the businesses the most flexibility for helping them to hopefully stay solvent during this time.
And would the fee stay, the permit fee stay the same?
So the current waiver is so that they don't have to pay any permit fee. So
Okay.
right now they don't pay any permit fee. Once the governor lifts the emergency proclamation, they would have 30 days to decide if they want to apply for a fee, for a permit and pay the actual fee that would be required, or whether they want to stop utilizing the right of way. And so that 30 days gives them that time to try to figure that out and then reapply for that permit. If they apply for that permit, depends upon how long they want to try to use the right of way. They can use it for up to 5 years. And the permit fee structure is an incremental basis depending upon how many years of that use they ask for.
Okay, thank you, Ingrid.
So Ingrid, for the businesses to apply after the expiration, are they aware that they have 30 days or how are they notified for that?
Yeah, so right now they are aware that they have to reapply for the permit once it expires. What we would do is write some amendments to their current permits to add the language in for this actual ordinance to correct that so that they are aware that they have that 30-day period.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions for Ingrid, Council? All right, Ingrid, thank you.
All right, thank you.
We'll now go into ordinance number 6825 with City Attorney Como.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, and Council. With me tonight is Harry Boucher, the Deputy City Attorney, and he will be providing the presentation on ordinance number 6825.
Good evening, Council. Harry Boucher, Deputy City Attorney. Before you tonight is proposed ordinance number 6825. It is in pages 31 through 35 of your packet, I believe. This is an ordinance that follows a lot of activity at the state level that has led up to this. You may have recalled the State versus Blake opinion that the Supreme Court issued earlier this year. That is the Supreme Court case that struck down the state's previously felony drug possession law, RCW 6954-013. And in reaction to that, the state legislature passed a bill 5476, ESB 5476 is the name that the law is given now until it's codified in the revised code. And with that reaction by the state legislature, they did a couple of things. First, they fixed the problem with that the State versus Blake court identified in the felony drug law, namely that the law did not have a knowing element of knowing possession. It didn't have the required mental state to find someone guilty of the offense. And so the legislature fixed that. They installed the word knowing or knowingly back into the law. But then they also reduced what was previously a felony, a Class C felony of illegal drug possession to a simple misdemeanor. And the other thing that they did was they decriminalized personal use related drug paraphernalia. So the use and delivery of any drug paraphernalia designed for personal use is no longer a criminal offense under the new law that's been passed. And so with that, and it being the state law, the changes to the state law, that affects some ordinances that we had on the books in Auburn City Code 922 in a couple of ways. And so this proposed ordinance is before you tonight asks you to simply repeal those code sections in our code to bring us in line with this new change in the state laws. 922010 is our city code on controlled substance possession. Our code is a gross misdemeanor, and under the new law that's just passed under 5476, drug possession is a simple misdemeanor, which is a lesser crime. And our city laws have to be consistent with state law. So now with this new state law passage, we would be inconsistent as a gross misdemeanor. The other thing is 922020 criminalizes drug paraphernalia possession. That used to be consistent with state law, but now personal use possession is being decriminalized, and so we would be essentially out of conformity with state law there as well. The other element of 6825 is a proposed revision to another area of our code, 924010. That is a loitering with the intent to engage in drug-related activity ordinance. It's a little bit different than the other items that are contained in the proposed ordinance. That needs to be amended in one respect. It does contain a revision and it contains a reference to ACC 922 that would need to be removed should you pass the other parts of the ordinance and repeal that part of the code. The other proposed revisions are merely linguistic and designed for increased clarity of that code section. And so if we're going to take the opportunity to make revisions, we thought it appropriate to put forward a clearer version of that ordinance for enforcement.
Well, here I have a question. So in relation to personal use, is that based upon the quantity of the drug that is in possession?
That's one thing that perhaps could be looked at, but I think really what it's geared toward is defining the terms. So they removed the terms paraphernalia used to encompass any instruments that were used to inhale or inject or introduce into the body a controlled substance. Those things have been removed, and so what they've left it with, the illegal paraphernalia, are things that are designed to manufacture or distribute. And so it's more in the nature of how the items are used is really the big change.
Okay,
So
thank you.
like, we're advising the police department things like drug pipes, syringes, those things that are designed merely to purely to use for one person, basically, or to introduce it into a person's body are now decriminalized.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I mean, well, paraphernalia, not to crosstalk too much, but paraphernalia is pretty broad too. I mean, it's like plastic bags, your pockets. It really is a very broad definition. I was just wondering if you guys, because we didn't get to touch on this in Dana's presentation, but I mean, if you could just sort of go into a little bit of, what the rest of the law does, in terms of asking, and I'm not sure how to say this, but the officer, the police officers, or maybe it's you, the prosecutor, to divert people to some form of treatment or social services, and just sort of the general overall thrust of the law with respect to that.
You mean the other parts of
5476?
Okay. That's kind of a work in progress. We're still working on exactly what that's going to look like and what our advice is going to be rolling out. I think a lot of jurisdictions are kind of struggling with that because the language in that part of the law is quite confusing, and there's not a lot of guidance there as to actually what that's supposed to be. But the gist of it is, I think the intent of it is police are encouraged to refer drug suspects to treatment agencies who are responsible to receive their referrals in lieu of booking into jail and referring to prosecution. And so we're in the process of working with, for example, WASPIC and some other sources to try to come up with the best way to implement that for the time being. But that is the intent, I think, of that part of the law.
Right. I mean, I personally feel that that's a good intent. I was just wondering, now that we have a new community court that's opening, is there any sort of interplay between our community court and people who are caught? Because I don't even know what they can be caught for, but I mean, I'm just sort of curious about how that might work out too.
So filings for drug paraphernalia, are obviously going to go down quite a bit, to likely to very few, if any. Drug possession may increase. That remains to be seen, but now it is entirely our purview. So you may recall the structure that we had for quite some time was felonies existed at the state level, but the county had filing guidelines. They would not file as felonies unless the amount of illegal drugs was over a certain threshold. And so that's why we passed 922010 to begin with, is to enable us to prosecute those cases where there was no prosecution going on. Now it is entirely misdemeanors with this new law change. And so that may increase our caseload in that area. It may not, it remains to be seen. But the short answer to your question is absolutely, that is a charge that is one of the criteria that we could definitely consider in referring people to community court. That's exactly why we created the program.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like good news. Is that something that your office or the city, we just fund that ourselves, or is there any funding in the state law?
For which, the referrals?
Yeah, I mean, now that it's a simple misdemeanor, but that does get people into the door for community court.
I don't know that there's
workload, or
I don't know that there's any specific funding. The referral program that you mentioned earlier what the state is intending to do is create what's called a recovery navigator program, but that is still in process and it is subject to funding. And so we're not even sure if that's going to actually happen, or if it does happen, what it's going to look like. I don't know if there's any specific funding to us beyond that, no.
Oh, okay, but do you anticipate having more work now, or is it more like?
It's certainly possible. Now, like I say, there's been a lot of lead up to this. There was quite a time when the county did not charge cases that were eligible for felony treatment because of the amount of the substance that was possessed. And so we ended up charging a lot of those cases to begin with. So it's not going to be entirely new to us to be doing drug possession cases. That's something we've been doing for quite some time, but it's now going to be all of them as opposed to just a certain cases that fall under county guidelines. And so there may be an increase. It's certainly possible. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay. So when we were, how many cases did you charge a year for the gross misdemeanor?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head. Quite a number. Yes, quite a lot. I will tell you quite a bit. It was a big part of our business, that's for sure. It always has been.
Okay, and so now they would just be for a simple misdemeanor.
Correct.
And the first two would be diverted under the state law.
We're working on how that's going to roll out exactly, but that is one possibility under the state law, yes.
Okay, and then the third and onwards, those would go to the community court, it sounds like?
If persons are eligible, anyone who is charged with this offense, if they're eligible under our criteria for community court, and there's a number, but this is an eligible offense. If they're otherwise eligible, then they would be offered the opportunity to go to community court. It is up to them to opt in and join the program.
Right. So I mean, my reading of, what I've grasped from the law is that it really is trying to focus more on, on treatments, on help.
That's correct.
And so, it sounds like if they do go to community court, then that's a better way for us to help them rather than just, not help them, I guess.
Well, that's you're not alone in that thinking, and that is why we created the program and we're operating it. So.
Yeah, no, I realized that was probably more of a statement. I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that, but yeah, I appreciate your help. They're really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So Harry, this is all related to personal possession and personal use. So state law for those who sell the drugs, we still have that intact for those who would possess more than personal use when they go out and do the dealings for people who are using it for personal use?
Yeah, so other aspects of drug laws have not been changed. So things related to sales and delivery and manufacturing, manufacturing methamphetamine, those kinds of things, those are all still unchanged.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions for Harry, counsel? All right, seeing none. Director Como and Harry, thank you very much
Thank
this
you.
evening, and thank you for the information. All right, we will now move into our finance, technology, and economic development discussion items. And for that, we'll turn the meeting over to Councilmember Baggett. You're muted, Bob.
I do not have a copy of the agenda with me out here in California land, but I believe this was to perhaps deal with an ordinance.
This is actually the IT update presentation with Director
Oh, this is the,
Travis.
okay, yeah, my mistake. Okay. Now, is this going to be David Travis, I believe?
Yes.
Take it away, David.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor DeCoursey, and Council. For the record, my name is David Travis, Innovation and Technology Director for the City of Palm. On the phone with me is Ashley Riggs, our Assistant Director of IT, and Brian Nguyen, our IT Project Manager. We were also supposed to have Ashton, our new Technical Services Manager, with us, but unfortunately he had a family emergency and had to fly out to California and will not be on the call with us tonight. Ashley has offered to run through the technical services slides on his behalf, so thank you, Ashley, for that. I'd also like to take this time to recognize Danica Olson, who's in Chambers, who works in IT. For those who don't know, Danica has been to pretty much every council meeting since the pandemic and has ran Zoom so that these meetings go off without a hitch. So thank you, Danica. I know she likes to stay kind of behind the scenes there, so there you go.
She's
I know
giving
there's
dirty looks right now, David.
Yeah, I'm sure she is, for sure. I know there are some on this call that have not had the pleasure of listening to the ramblings of an IT director before. So I will keep it as brief as I can through this IT update. I also apologize in advance because of some of what I'm going to talk about. I've repeated in previous presentations, so I apologize for that if you've heard some of these talking points before. Since we have a captive audience tonight, we will be providing an overview along with IT updates. First off, what is IT? Everyone on this call probably has a different perspective of what we do. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, we can help add to those perspectives. Just know this, my team spends a lot of time and energy on things before we break them. I'm joking. I know there's some people who have a perspective of IT that we just break things. Kidding aside, IT plays an important role in the continuity of operations for the city. We provide all of the digital highways so that all those little ones and zeros can get to their favorite destinations. We ensure the survivability of data and systems from unforeseen catastrophic events. We protect critical infrastructure, data, and assets from cyber attacks. We provide tools like Zoom and Teams for communication. We build robust and fault-tolerant digital infrastructures. We deploy systems that allow for the workforce to be flexible and mobile. We manage vendor contracts and software license agreements. We work with our business partners to do process review, analysis, and improvement using digital tools. Our GIS team uses the science of geography and technology to visualize data for our business partners, helping them find patterns, relationships, and fundamentally helping them make better data-driven decisions. We provide service desk support for day-to-day operations. We oversee the city's UAV drone program. We also support the technical needs of our neighbors, the city of Algona and the city of Pacific. There are three main points I want to touch on tonight: where we were, where we are, and finally, where we are headed. Where we were. Does anyone remember 2019? Anybody? It was so long ago, and I know for us, it seems like it was around 1 million COVID years ago. In 2019, IT started the execution phase of our mobile workforce plan. The vision of our plan was mobility without boundaries. We wanted to put systems and technology in place that would release the tethers of the physical buildings of the city and allow employees to get work done independent of their geographical location. The mobile first plan was going to take us approximately 3 to 5 years to fully adopt and implement. We spent a lot of time planning the architectural changes that would be needed for the success of this plan. Little did we know at the time how important this work was going to be in 2020. Where we are. 2020 taught a lot of IT professionals about resiliency. My team is no different. We went through the ups and downs of change as we pushed for the innovations to solve the technical challenges that we were faced with during the COVID crisis. COVID forced us to think again. The challenge I posed to my team: how do we forget what we know, allow as many employees as possible to work from home, continue to be secure, all while continuing the operations of the city with minimal interruptions? I can still remember the looks on my team's face as they stared back at me during the realization of what we were about to do. We had to reevaluate our philosophies, change our culture, and reimagine who we are as an IT organization. We had to rapidly fast forward our mobile first plan. We not only had to create an environment for employees to survive, but continue to thrive in a new and remote workplace. And do it fast, unprecedented fast. We had to redefine how we do IT services. Our decision models and way of thinking had to change. We built up a new data center and increased our internet bandwidth to support the new directional shift in workloads. We moved electronic communication, phone systems, and remote application computing power to the cloud. We replaced hundreds of standalone desktops with mobile devices so that employees could easily move around, not only to support the needs of the city, but to support the needs of their families. We reorganized and restructured our department to better meet the needs of the new normal. We changed how we handle after-hour support calls to allow for people with new non-standard work shifts. We retrained our artificial intelligence security models to allow for the different set of user behaviors. In 2020, we completely changed. And we did this in what felt like overnight, not the 3 to 5 years as we were planning for. Where are we headed? The mobile workforce within the city is here to stay. This year, we are building upon our plans to be cloud first and mobile first ready. We have proven the possibilities of mobility without boundaries. Hopefully at this point, you are starting to get a new perspective of IT. As part of our reimagining, we have restructured IT into 3 distinct divisions: project management, technical services, and business success. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Brian, who officially became our IT project manager last year as part of our reorganization. He's going to talk about project management within the group, some of our priority projects, and how we are working towards the formalization of IT project management. Brian?
Thank you for the introduction, David. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council for giving me the opportunity tonight to talk about IT project management. For the record, my name is Brian Nguyen, and I manage projects for our IT department. For our team, we also have Brett Sanderson, who is an IT systems analyst, but I've nicknamed him the solutions finder because I can always count on Brett to help us find solutions to any of our projects. Since the creation of my position at the end of 2020, we've been working hard to formalize our IT project management process. We've determined that these are some of the characteristics that a project is or has. A project has a defined start and end date. It must require a significant amount of hours to complete. It must produce a service, a product, or change a current process. It has to contain a budget, and a project requires extensive coordination between users, stakeholders, multiple departments, and also our vendors. Our projects follow the typical project lifecycle, which starts in the initiation phase. This is where we look at a project and decide if it's a project we can take on or not. And if it is, we start with the project charter. After that, we move on to the planning phase, which is where we decide everything that encompasses the project, including all the tasks that is needed to bring this project to life. Then we move on to the execution phase, which is where we do work on all the tasks and all the things that we already identified during the planning phase. Once we have completed all the tasks and completed all the deliverables, we can move the project towards its closure. One of the ways we track our projects is using our custom-built Kanban board. At any given time, we can look at this board and see where a project is in its project lifecycle. This board is also helpful because it gives us insights to if a project is being stagnated. We can see it, quickly identify it, and help it move it along. One of the ways we communicate with our stakeholders is through our weekly project status report. So our directors or managers, every week they get this report and they quickly see where their project is and what the current status is. And if they have any questions, they could reach out to me at any given time. We accomplished, like David mentioned, we accomplished a lot of things in 2020. So the next slide, I just want to show some of the major accomplishment and major projects we were able to complete as it pertains into 3 different categories: productivity, mobility, and security. For the sake of time, I won't do a deep dive into any of these projects, but if anyone has questions, feel free to ask, and we will be more than happy to answer during our Q&A session. I do, however, want to focus on 3 main projects we are taking on this year. The first is our disaster recovery site. As David mentioned, in 2020, we set up our completely new IT data center. Right now, we focus on duplicating that exact infrastructure at our offsite location. What this means is all of our virtual machines, our virtual servers, all of our data, software is being currently duplicated so that in a catastrophic event, something happens to our current production site, we can quickly turn on our offsite and our staff can continue business as normal. Right now, we are finished with that phase, but working on documentation, testing, and planning, as well as refining this process so that we're ready to go at a moment's notice. As David also mentioned, during 2020, we transitioned over hundreds of devices, which is a typical desktop environment, to a more mobile device ready, which is our Microsoft Surface. This year, we are continuing to focus on mobility and finding more opportunities to be even more mobile in preparation for any future events. And as the city become more mobile, security is even more important for us. So in the very near future, we'll be rolling out MFA to every single staff. MFA stands for multi-factor authentication, which means pretty much having more than one way to authenticate yourself. Typically, you have your password. This will also require a secondary device. So some of you may be familiar with this if you do online banking. So when you sign on to your online bank, you enter your username, your password, and then usually you get a text message on your phone, which then you have to enter a PIN to authenticate yourself. Well, we're doing something very similar for the city to further protect our staff as well as our data. I'm very excited to be part of the project team and to help bring new technology to the city so that we can continue to be productive, be mobile, and secure. Thank you for your time. And at this, and I would like to give it back to our director, David Travis.
All right, thank you, Brian. One of the things that Brian didn't mention in there in that project, when we define a project, we actually call that process Hell's Gate, which means it's got to run through a bunch of different check items. And if it makes it through Hell's Gate, then that project is officially launching, and Brian will take control of that. The other piece on that multi-factor authentication that he's talking about, it isn't new to the city as much as it is going to be new for some of the other departments. So remember, because we have a police department, we do have some CJIS federal law requirements. So all of our police department and legal and IT are already using the technology for multi-factor authentication. All right, next I'm going to hand it over to Ashley Riggs, the Assistant IT Director. He's going to go over the technical services slide. So again, thank you, Ashley, for taking that on for us. And then walk through how we are changing what customer success looks like through our newly formed Business Systems Analyst Group. Ashley?
All right, thank you, David. Good evening, everyone. Deputy Mayor, Mayor, and Council. For the record, my name is Ashley Riggs, and I am the Assistant Director of IT. It's been a while since I've had the honor to present to you all, so I thank you for tonight and look forward to our brief time together. As David mentioned, I will be presenting on behalf of Ashton and the Technical Services Group. As I go through this presentation, I hope none of this content is necessarily new, but rather just a reminder about us and hopefully an update on what we're doing. So let's start with kind of 3 divisions of technical services. The divisions or the functional groups, if you will, is the service desk, GIS or Geographic Information Systems, and the network group. All 3 of these groups work together just as our entire department does, but they do have a distinct role that I believe is important to point out. Before we do that though, let's kind of look at our team. So you can see up on the screen there that there's, or in your slides or handout, there are 8 employees made up of the technical services team, 9 if you include Ashton. The 3 across the top are our support specialists, the service desk team. Along the middle there is that network team. And then the bottom 2 on the slide is the GIS team. So those are your 3 functional groups that we talked about. I think what's exciting about this group is just the wide range of Auburn experience and the skill set that we have. In this group, you've got GIS, which is a little bit different than the network and which is a little bit different than service desk. Christina and Jonathan actually started less than 4 months ago. While Brian and Colin that you see on the screen, they've been here for almost 20 years. So there's a nice blend of some in-house knowledge and also some fresh set of eyes and perspective. And also a shout out here to HR. During the COVID pandemic, we were able to hire Ashton, Christina, and Jonathan. So that's a pretty cool accomplishment all around. So the service desk, again, one of the functional groups of the technical services team is the single point or triage. So anything that a city staff member requests, whether that's in person, over the phone, or email, that group, those 3 support specialists handle that and triage it based off of kind of the need and so forth. They are also responsible for the distribution, maintenance, and replacement of all hardware devices that are used by city employees. So that's your Surface, your cell phone, your iPad. And they're broken into kind of a triage, middle, and field role. And that allows us to be not only organized, but efficient in how we handle those requests coming in. The triage person is the dedicated person to that in-person, on-phone, email. Middle's the one who's fixing things, tearing things apart, putting them back together, fixing things. And the field person's the one who's out running around in the field, delivering things to a lot of the different sites that David and Brian just mentioned. The GIS group, that is the second group of technical services. That group's kind of the glue that keeps a lot of the applications in the city together. They do all of the application development, most of the application integration, and all of the spatial analysis that's done is within GIS. As David mentioned, GIS is also the group that operates our city drone program, which is pretty darn successful, and a big kudos to that group for that. The third and kind of final group of technical services is really the group that we hope you never hear from. We don't want this group to be out in front of people, or otherwise they probably made the newspaper, and we don't want that. This group is broken down even further into a network, systems, and a security group. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And it's really not only for, keeping things consistent and safe, but allows some real distinct roles. So the first one here, is the network group. The network group is kind of the highway, if you will, that connects all of the city buildings together. As you can see up on the screen, there's 21 city buildings. All of them are connected via high-speed fiber, and really allows anyone in the city to work at any one of those buildings without limitations of internet connectivity. The systems group or systems infrastructure is really the engine that drives all the services that we're doing. Right now, us being on an internet-based call requires internet. So a lot of that infrastructure is part of what is that engine. And now, as you've heard with what Brian and David were talking about, we are virtual, we are scalable, and we're able to handle a lot of that security and mobility because of these this network and these systems. And then finally, the security group. And really, you know, security is nothing, you know, no one really wants to talk about security or have it on the forefront, but it is a very big deal and a big part of what we do on a daily basis in IT. And our focus, as you can see up there, there's quite a bit up there. I don't want to read it to you all, but we're doing a lot, not only proactively with some of the staff education and hardware and software tools in place, but things like artificial intelligence and stuff that's actually going out there and learning what our systems and folks are doing to help protect us and increase our security posture. So between what you've heard Brian talk about with some of the bigger projects and David and kind of my brief discussion on the technical services side, I hope you're seeing a recurring theme here, and that's really that productivity, mobility, and security, because it is really the three guideposts that we have and what we've been doing for the last couple of years. So I hope that kind of comes out in this presentation. So the next thing I'd like to go is kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the customer service piece. As we've been talking about for the past 20 minutes or so, we're consistently looking to help staff be more successful, whether that's, you know, implementing a new piece of technology, helping a project from start to finish. Our number one goal is customer success. We take pride in what we do, and I hope that shows in not only this presentation, but really just our daily interactions, whether that's in person or virtual. We take pride in making sure that you are being successful, which translates to customer success. To do that, we have a team, and on this particular slide, we have a team of business systems analysts, or BSAs. The 4 BSAs on the customer service team are broken up to support the 9 departments of the city. They're divided by the size and need of each department. So for example, Chrissy supports the administration, community development, and the parks, arts, and recreation departments. Her role is to understand those departments in depth, the employees within those departments, the applications within those departments, and then being able to find a way to provide efficiencies with technology and relationships so those departments can be successful. That would be the same for Danica, who got the shout out earlier today. She's helping the clerks, finance, and human resource departments. Our public works department, airport engineering and M&O, we actually just got our official acceptance letter today, so I'm excited to share that Ron will be starting as the new BSA for Public Works. We'll be starting July 16th, so we're looking forward to that. And Scott is helping legal and police, especially since legal and police are so closely tied. That's a nice blend there. So customer service can often be thought about as something when you call someone for help, but actually it's much bigger than that. It's about customer success, or in our case, we're calling it the customer life cycle. Similar to what Brian's slide was talking about on the project life cycle, there's a customer life cycle as it relates to customer success. And I'd like to kind of dive into that a little bit. The first thing is customer service. Customer service is our ability to proactively deliver the IT services to employees. The key word there is proactively. It's really about the relationships, us being available and providing a great experience. The last thing you want is to not talk to an IT person when you have a problem because you can't get along with that person or they don't listen or something like that that would turn you off from wanting to talk with IT. So customer service is our ability to proactively provide these things up on the screen so you want to talk to us. So when you have a problem, you want to get that fixed. The next one is customer support. This is really our ability to reactively support the IT services used by the city. So this is where an employee has something and they want something new. Okay, they have a request for something. How can we support that request? And what we do to be efficient is we break every request coming in from a city employee into 3 categories. It's either a request for information, and that could be something simple as a question or it could be I need you to do some data gathering, or it can be anything along the lines of, I need a question answered. We have a 3 business day turnaround on that, and we'll kind of talk about what a service level agreement is. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with that term, a service level agreement or an SLA. Those are our published agreements to you guys and everyone in the city that says, if you request this, it will take us a maximum of 3 days to get that back to you. A request for service is a request for something new. So for example, if someone comes up to us and says, I need a iPhone, I don't have one, I need one. That's a request for something new. Usually something new takes 14 days, and that's because we have to order it. That's because we have to make sure that it's approved by the directors and all of that kind of good stuff. If it gets longer than 14 days, that's where it kind of kicks out to Brian's group, and we look at this as a project as part of that Hell's Gate process. A request for an iPhone for a person is much easier than I need my entire department to have a new iPhone. That's a different level of a request that would kick out to a project. An incident, the third kind of bucket, is you have something and it broke. So I cannot log into something. When I click on this website, I cannot get to it. Those are all things that you had it no longer works, and we have a 3-day turnaround on those. I think it's important to note that the SLAs that we have up on the screen here, 3 days, 14 days, 3 days, those are our maximum. This is the longest it's going to take us, and we shoot for obviously much quicker than that, but we'll kind of talk about why we have these service level agreements in place here in just a second. Okay. Oh, the next bucket, kind of the third and final bucket, is customer success. And customer success is really that customer lifecycle that I mentioned, and it's really directly related to you as the customer being successful and happy. So that we in IT don't stand in the way of that, we work on a daily basis to be efficient and effective as we can to provide service. So first, we have a daily operations that consists of an 8 o'clock stand-up call, an 11 a.m. touch base call, and a 3 p.m. roundup call. This allows us to stay very focused and intentional throughout the day to make sure that we are providing that customer support, that customer service, and that customer success. The first call that we have every day is our daily stand-up. Stand-up is a call where all IT employees meet wherever they are to discuss the department and individual priorities. So whether you're at one of those 21 sites, whether you're in the office, whether you're at home, everyone joins this call, and we not only talk about what the priorities are for the day, but it allows us to share and collaborate on maybe there's a roadblock that someone knows about that can help with something else, but it really allows us to stay focused and intentional on our priorities for the day. You can see there it's broken into 5 different priorities. At the afternoon 3 o'clock roundup call every day, that's another call where IT employees meet to discuss. And we talk about simply, what was I able to complete today versus what did I say I was going to complete today at our stand-up call. This allows us to identify any roadblocks and reprioritize for the following business day. Okay. So we talked about the customer lifecycle. We talked a little bit about the buckets of it, but how do we actually measure if we're being successful or not? A lot of what we do in IT, but specifically this group, is behind the scenes. We want to make sure that we're implementing technology and relationships and all of that to help support the city and its employees so that they are successful. To give you some perspective, as it relates specifically to the BSA group, and again, these are annual averages. On average, the BSA group closes out 10,000 tickets per year. So of that information, request for service, request for incidents, or an incident break fix, roughly on average, the BSA group closes 10,000 of those tickets a year. So remember, when we break down those tickets, it allows us to measure them. But when we look at the customer lifecycle, the first one, and again, this is just for 2021, but the first one is our customer service. Of those 10,000 tickets that we close every year, about 3,500 of them roughly get a survey sent out. And I'm sure you've seen some of these before, but if you submit a ticket, you're going to get a survey afterwards saying, hey, how'd we do? And we have a 98% satisfaction rating on those 3,500 surveys returned. The next one is our customer support. And again, this is our service level agreements. This is us saying within 3 days or 14 days or whatever it is, we are going to take the ticket that you submitted and we are going to work it to closure until you're happy. We did that 95% of the time before the due date was up. And then lastly, just the customer success, the happy customers. Are customers happy? That's a real hard one to get a tangible measurement to, but just from our interactions, us walking around, talking with people, us doing these types of calls, daily check-ins, we believe that customers are happy. So if we look at kind of our availability, which I think is a key part of customer success, we are available to you. We are available 7 to 5 in person every day, Monday through Friday. We are available via email and via phone. In addition, we are available 24/7. So between 5 p.m. and 7 a.m. every day, we have someone on call, on standby, waiting to take anything that comes in after hours. And that would be, obviously 24 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday. But finally, as you can see, some of the BSA mini projects that we've been talking about, these are not Brian's Hell's Gate projects. These are smaller projects that the BSAs are working on themselves. Again, those kind of 8 projects a year. These are some of the things up on the screen that we're looking to tackle by the end of 2022. But again, the reoccurring theme here, you'll see it on the slide: mobility, productivity, security. That's really the reoccurring theme. So that's the end of kind of the presentation from my perspective. I really do thank everyone's time and willingness to listen and learn, and for your support for all that we do, because it's greatly appreciated. At this point, I'm going to turn it back to David, and he can wrap things up.
All right, thank you, Ashley. Ashley did make a comment about we strive to make people happy. Sometimes we strive to make people happy-ish. I just wanted to throw that out there. Because sometimes the ish is the important piece of what we do. As you can see, for the last year and a half, the Innovation Technology Department has changed. The technology has changed, our processes have changed, the culture has changed. With all the negatives of COVID-19, there are some benefits. The work from home order definitely catapulted our digital transformation within the city in unmeasurable ways. It's an exciting time to be a technologist. And I'm proud to lead a team that has spent many hours, long days, and sleepless nights putting technology in place to help the city survive during a time of so many unknowns. We are energized to solve the technical challenges of the future, including helping employees return to the office starting in July. Thank you for listening. I hope 2021 is good to you. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
Any questions out there, council, for David or any of his staff?
Councilmember J. Ross has a question.
James.
Thank you, Councilmember Baggett. Appreciate it. David, thank you for the presentation, and thank you, Brian and Ashley, as well. My biggest concern is what we have had in our country lately is the cyber theft, locking up systems. And I think you might have answered the question where everything is duplicated and stored somewhere else in the cloud. I'm kind of guessing at this point. If something like that happens, can we get up and running immediately?
So I think that's a loaded question. Because it really depends on what the event is, right? And how kind of spread out the event is. So one of the things we were talking about that Brian was talking in our disaster recovery process, in 2020, we revamped how we do backups, for example. Our backup process of all of our data systems has been completely overhauled and changed. And one of the things we did in that backup recovery, just the backups themselves, not the other recovery site that Brian was talking about, but just the backup of the data itself. We've isolated those backups, and most of those security threats that you see where an agency gets a cyber event, well, they can't recover the backups because the backups are also attacked and the backups are also encrypted. So when they go to recover the backups are failing too. So one of the things we do as part of our process is to isolate the backups from the systems so that they can't be touched once they've been backed up and archived. And there's a special process that we do. We do multiple things. So it really depends. Another thing we've done just recently, we've entered into a contract with a security firm who is going to, and Brian's working on this project now, that's going to review all of our processes, our policies within IT to start with, to just ensure that we're doing everything kind of best practice when it comes to security. Because sometimes we live in our own little bubbles and we think we know what we know until we don't, and that's when the event happens, right? So I think from a security stance, we are in a way better posture based on some of the changes and alterations that we've made in our environments over the last year or two.
So looks like you guys are imagining stuff at this point, which is actually good. That way you can actually imagine things happening and being ready for it as well.
Yeah.
So do you have a comment?
I was just going to say, the cyber event stuff is part of the bigger picture when it comes to recovery. It's, like kind of what Brian was saying, it's also what if we had a fire in the annex building and we lost the primary systems? We've seen agencies around the country who have had catastrophic losses because of things that could happen and we didn't prepare for them. So luckily, in the past, one of the things with security in the past, it was kind of hush hush. If you had a cyber event or a cyber something, nobody talked about it. So it was kind of hidden, and fines were paid behind the scenes. But now what we're seeing over the last year is it's becoming open. I mean, even at the federal government level, we're seeing more focus on cyber events and quick communications of different threats. I mean, we see threat analysis coming to the city way faster than we've ever seen before. And that really helps out too.
Well, thank you very much. You guys are doing great. I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
I just have a comment. I want to thank Director Travis, Brian, and Ashley. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. And it's really nice to see that we are up to speed on everything. And also, I just have to say that you have got the best team when we need the help. They're right there. Christina Hill, she has been my lifesaver here recently. And so has Noah. He has helped me on some things that I needed. And they don't treat you like you're their grandpa or grandma. They're so respectful, and they're so quick to show you what you're doing wrong. And I've learned so much on what I needed to learn just from your staff. And I just want to thank you for hiring some upgrade employees so that we can continue, us council members being able to continue doing our job when we need it, when we need our iPad working, our phone and stuff like that. So just thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing for our city and keeping us safe. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to add, like I said, Christina, she's only been here 4 months. She stepped right in, and she's she's killing it when it comes to supporting the city.
That's what she said. I asked her, when did you get hired? Because I've never seen you. And she goes, well, I've only been here 4 months. It was so cute. But yeah, she's awesome. Thank you.
Member Stearns.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Baggett. Yeah, thank you all. You know, the IT department has been really helpful, and appreciate all the help too on setting up the city, well, my city's Twitter account, which I encourage everyone else to look into. I was going to ask you about, you know, does the department have any role when it comes to equity? And one of the things our city's been looking at is, you know, equity and how we approach programs and who has access to certain things. And I was just thinking in terms of broadband access, is that something that your department looks into? You know, how people in Auburn have access to the internet? Is that something you make recommendations on?
Yep. So remember, we also look at King County finished their broadband study, which kind of went through and looked at who had the ability to get to what type of access for broadband connectivity. The city did, and before I started here, the city did enter into some broadband expansion to kind of get to those underserved areas as best that we could, right? But the expenses themselves started racking up, and some of those big money things we just couldn't do. The technology was changing so fast. And then we're starting to see, like now we're seeing a lot of push again for that, you know, with the mobile, everything, COVID-19, we're seeing lots of dollars being thrown at it, which is great because it's not the city of Auburn who has to brunt the entire thing. One of the things that we have added in our ARPA funding discussion is how do we help fund some of the underserved connectivity issues without necessarily becoming a broadband entity. And we don't know what that is. We're working with our partners at different government entities to try to figure out how can we help the underserved without the city of Auburn becoming the broadband expansion utility, if you will, in that neighborhood. So, you know, the school districts, I sit on a committee with a lot of technology people in the area, and, you know, the school districts have done an amazing job of getting internet connectivity, different Wi-Fi access points for their students, their families. And I think what we're starting to see is just the growth of that. 2021 is going to be a major expansion with what King County is doing, what we're seeing the federal money doing, but the ARPA funding that's coming. It's all going to come together. Honestly, the biggest problem right now is it's hard to predict how it's going to come together because it's coming together with so many different angles, if that makes sense. So definitely, yes, we have our finger on the pulse, if you will, of that need within the communities. The hard part is how do we execute that plan?
So, but are you saying that we've ruled out the offering broadband as a utility ourselves?
Well, and I think there's some, and I haven't checked if it passed, but I think there was some legislature coming through that would allow the city to become a utility or to partner with a utility. I wouldn't say that we have ruled it out, but there are definitely other options that are starting to become available to allow that to happen.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for David or his team? Well, seeing none. David, I really want to thank you and Ashley and Brian for the comprehensive report and update. And these are always refreshing, especially to me, because I can't remember all the stuff that you folks do all the time. And I know that you've bailed myself and probably everyone on the dais time and time again. So again, many thanks to you and your team, and keep up the good work. I look forward to hearing your report and update again. Thank you.
Thank you. Back
to you, Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Councilmember Baggett, and along with fellow council members, David and Ashley and Brian, Yeah, thank you very much. And also, I'll give a shout out to Danica for keeping us going during these times. And behind the scenes, we don't see her face, but we know she's there. And we've all had a little bit of problem with our connectivity, and we've had to make sure, and the mayor's trying to get her on camera, trying to make sure that we have all had this seamless event, looking at each other on a computer screen. So Danica, thank you. Awesome job. All right. Where is she? There she goes. Okay. All right, council. Any other discussion items this evening? Any new business? All right, hearing none. Great meeting, everybody. Have a wonderful evening and look forward to seeing everybody in person really soon. We are adjourned.